Hey all, I was just checking outside on the bird's nest on my front door. I'm going to set up a stream for that, but sadly one of the chicks died, so I was just laying it to rest here, giving it a fucking celebration of life, okay? So that's what was happening. Alrighty, let's get started. Let's see where MAGA's at, and let's see where all the various cult members are, and like what all they're up to. Because to be honest with you guys, I'm sure it's some fuck shit. Okay. Now I am in my PJs, so fuck, man. What the hell? Good grief. I'm having problems. I'm having problems. I know. Isn't that so sad? Good Lord. Like. And here's the thing, too. So maybe you would know about this, because, like, okay. Essentially, the bird had, I don't know if I'm hot or cold right now. I can't tell. But anyway, the bird had, like, fallen. Okay, it looked almost like it had been, like, plucked out of the nest by, like, another bird or something, maybe. Because it didn't have any squish injuries. It wasn't bleeding. It didn't look like it had, I don't know, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it almost looked like it had been plucked out, because in the nest is so, like, deep down in the wreath. It would be really hard for it to fall, even with wind, and we haven't slammed the door or anything. So I'm just curious, like, what could have happened to the birdie? Like, I'm really curious what in the world, you know, happened here. I just have no idea. I mean, there are other predatory birds here, so I guess that's possible, but it's sad. It's sad. The other little chicks are moving around, but I'm going to check that the parents come back. Yeah, it might. You know what? You might be right. No, that makes, girl, thank you. That makes sense. I'm just so sad. Like, that's so sad. I checked to see if it was still alive, and I picked it up with a paper towel, and I even set it on my little, like, outdoor, like, topiary little thing that the landscaping people cut. That's so sad. Just in case it was alive, but it's not. And I think you might be right. It probably got picked up or kicked out, because I don't know what else could possibly have gotten it out of there. It's just so sad. Gosh darn it. Anyway, yeah, sad for the baby, poor little baby birdie. Okay, hold on one sec. I'm getting everything all. No, there we are. Poor baby. But I think you might be right. I think you just figured out what happened. I am not looking forward to seeing what's going on with this guy here. Let's see, though.
For almost 3 decades, Russell Brand has used his puzzling success in both the UK and the US to allegedly attack countless women.
Sad.
And not only was this an alleged open secret in the industry, but many have claimed that Brand was enabled by those around him. Brand has had a very wide and lucrative career, starting in the UK in the early 2000s as both a TV and radio host. He moved to the US to star in several big Hollywood productions, and he's also had success as an author, married a pop star, and tried to speak about politics and wellness. He's currently moved on to social media and has millions of followers on both YouTube and Rumble, and is making a fortune releasing content daily. Some may think that Brand's career changes are just him moving on to other things, but in reality, his career moves have been governed by his horrendous behavior behind the scenes.
People keep picking him out
and in
of places.
2023, this behavior finally caught up to him. Not only did the general public become aware of his behavior behind the scenes, but he's also been charged with many unspeakable crimes. So that's what we'll be discussing today. Russell Brand's behavior both behind the scenes and out in the open. We'll also be discussing the many allegations that Brand is about to face in court later this year, along with the countless incidents over his career that seem to show who Russell Brand truly is. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to the dark and manipulative world of an alleged Hollywood monster.
I'm sadder
Russell
about the bird.
Brand.
I'm more sad about the bird. I shouldn't be. I should be sad about
Russell
other
Brand's
things.
career first
Sorry.
First took off in the UK comedy and hosting scene in the early and mid 2000s, and he was given unbelievable opportunities throughout his entire career that he consistently ruined with his horrendous behavior every single time. And this pattern you will see continue throughout his entire career, be it in the UK, in the US, in movies, in hosting, in comedy, whatever it is. He is given chance after chance and just repeats the same horrendous things time and time again. He's someone who, despite being a terrible human being, difficult and, in my opinion, untalented, he still managed to go on to enormous success in both the UK and the US. His behavior is the thing that ultimately does get him fired from jobs and make him unbookable, but that only happens after there's probably a dozen
This is
times.
Cults and Coffee, by the way, so this is not a scheduled stream. I just tried to get on when I could. But yeah, this is Cults and Coffee, and actually really quick, I'm going to set up my vault because I do have to start, or not start, continue continue ingesting Epstein files and things like that into the vault. So one sec. Yeah, Russell Brand, man. Like, all right, Toby, that's enough. It's gonna be out there warbling. I swear. I'm over it. Okay, I'll restart the video in one sec. Alrighty, I am. Well, actually, I'll start it again now.
That he should have been fired before that, and after he's wreaked untold damage to countless people that have been around him, be it in a work environment that they're actually people working with him or around him, or they're even people that are just in the audience of his work. Because for many, many years in both the UK and the US, Russell Brand has been apparently allowed to do whatever the fuck he wanted to do. And the thing that makes this just even worse is that this was known what he was doing, and he was enabled for almost 3 decades to do these horrendous things. And he wasn't just having people turn a blind eye to it. He was rewarded time and time again. Brand has been fired from practically every job he's ever had, unless he was the person producing it, which is what he's done in more recent years, because he was just consistently fired for his behavior. Another infuriating thing about Brand's career is that when he has actually been fired or there has been consequences to his actions, it's because of behavior in front of the camera and behavior that has made whatever company or network or channel look bad. It isn't because of what he was doing behind the scenes to women. He, in his earlier days of his career, got a really big break in the year 2000 when he was given a hosting show on MTV, and this was kind of the 2000 version of Man with a Microphone, as he would go to nightclubs and interview people in and around the nightclubs. Brand started this role in 2000 and was fired in 2000.
What the fuck? Will it not pause? There we go. Yeah, she means like man on the street interviewers, man with a microphone. And yeah, again, this is Cults and Coffee. Just, yeah, feel free to show her some love. She's awesome. I thought she'd be a good place to start with some of the MAGA personalities, and I'm planning to go over to Candace Owens. God help me.
And if you listen to him talk about why he was fired, he talks about how he was struggling with his addiction, and he ended up introducing the Australian pop star Kylie Minogue, who is enormous in the UK and Australia. I know she's known in the US, but she's really big in the UK and Australia and elsewhere. And he says that he brought his drug dealer into MTV, introduced Kylie Minogue, and then doesn't really say much more and all of a sudden he's
Totally
fired.
sad.
While that did seemingly
better.
happen, and Kylie Minogue and her sister Danny Minogue really do not like
forgot about her
Russell
sister.
Brand and have said so
All right.
many times, and you will see this throughout the video, that there have been not only
Hey, what the
women
heck?
in the media speak out, one even on a TV show went after Russell Brand and told him to his face what exactly she thought of him and all of the things she knew about him. But most of the time this is either cut out of shows, ignored, played off by others like it's a joke. But
It's not a joke. That's
the thing
for dang
with Kylie
sure.
Minogue is that, yes, this introduction happened, but he doesn't really talk about one of the key details, that when he made this introduction, it was the 12th of September 2001, and he had come to work dressed as bin Laden the day after the horrendous attacks on the US. And you'll also see this throughout his career, that he seems
I
to
feel
do
like I have like an edgy sense of humor to some extent, but for me that's just not appropriate. That's not appropriate. That's, I don't care who you are, that's not appropriate. Okay. So no thank you on that one. Wow, I'm sorry. That's pretty bad, dude.
awful things for no other reason than getting attention and causing some sort of pain, annoyance,
Jeez
aggravation to others. At this time in 2001, Brand was in his late 20s and he was addicted to various substances and alcohol. And prior to hosting this job at MTV, he had been trying to make
I completely forgot he had a job at MTV. What the heck kind of a... Ooh,
as an actor, and he'd gone to and been kicked out of a boarding school and 2 different drama schools, and he'd done a few odd roles in the 90s for shows that were like long running in the UK, like The Bill, but he hadn't really done anything outside of like a few little 1-episode speaking roles. He first had become interested in acting after he ended up performing.
Like, this is just my opinion, and this might sound mean, but he has a malevolent vibe to him. You can't tell me that's not a malevolent vibe right there.
In the school play, which was Bugsy Malone, and he played the part of Fat Sam, which was actually the first role I ever got in a school play, because I was always given the boys' parts for some reason.
How cool is
So
that?
that's a weird
Hey.
coincidence.
The
But
hell?
he has always said that he didn't
Hey.
actually like acting or want to act. It was because when he was in this play, he got a lot of attention, and after the play finished, he said that he was inconsolable for weeks and would like break down because he
Wow.
wanted to get that attention again.
That's-
And he
Look, I'm not diagnosing him. I'm making mention of that particular thing being consistent with narcissistic traits, but that is very consistent with like traits that are absolutely necessary for a diagnosis of malignant narcissism. Not saying he is definitely a malignant narcissist, I'm just making note of the traits.
from then on just pursued, I want to get that attention, fame, whatever it may be, as much of it as possible, as quickly as possible, and whatever way I can, I'm gonna get it. One way Brand quickly learned he could get attention was through women, be it his relationships and activities with them, and or saying outrageous things about them or to them. For example, when he lost his
That's
virginity at the age of
unacceptable.
15, the young girl he slept with asked him not to say anything. And not only did Brand tell everyone he knew, he literally says that, he later set up a tape recorder so that he could ask her leading questions so he could get her on tape admitting that they did, and then he proceeded to use that against her, which he tells this story in his book. And well, he has several books, and a lot of his early life is in his first book, which is called My Bookie Wookie, which is just the most cringe thing. And he has My Bookie Wook 2, awful. And from the title to the substance of the book, it is the worst celebrity book I've ever read, worst book I've ever read. And I've talked about before, I have a hyperfixation on celebrity memoirs and autobiographies and things, so I've read a lot of them, and I love you guys, and I'm gonna tell you, you guys know how much I love you now, because getting through the research for this video has been one of the most difficult research I've ever done, because it just is so abhorrent, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about. All of his books are horrendous. The first one has especially just a lot of stories that are, I cannot believe someone would do those things, but then write them down and publish them in a book. And what's even more insane is that the first two books, especially the first one, has amazing reviews, was not only a bestseller but the Christmas #1, and even his book that came out the other day, like 3 days ago, I'm filming this on the 27th of April, the new book is called How to Become a Christian in 7 Days. In that book, he literally says, I can't talk about the legal case, which we're of course going to get into, because in the UK there's something called contempt of court. I mean, obviously they have that sort of thing in the US, but it means a different thing in the UK, and it means that you can't talk like on news channels or really anything in the media about a case when it's ongoing, because it's supposed to be like, oh, you're not going to sway opinion and potential jurors and things like that, because obviously the UK is a lot smaller than the US. And it's why when Russell Brand went on Piers Morgan the other day, and Megyn Kelly a few days ago too, that they didn't really like go into a lot of the allegations. And what's even crazier is I'd actually started working on this video before the Piers Morgan thing came out. I'd been working on the video only a few days when I saw Piers Morgan post that I'm gonna post this interview with Russell Brand, and I sent it to my friend who helps me edit, and I was like, the powers are out of control. Like every video that I start working on, something happens. But we'll get into the Piers Morgan and the allegations and everything, of course, in just a minute, because he has had massive amounts of backlash to the Piers Morgan interview and the Megyn Kelly one. And honestly, I might have like some updates and stuff, because I'm sure that he's gonna say something about it, because he releases a video every day on YouTube. I'm sure he films in advance and stuff, so it might take a few days to catch up where he will say something, but I can't imagine that he gets this much backlash and attention and he doesn't frame something about oh, they're after him or people are trying to take him down or something like that. So there's my prediction. If I cut in here with an editing section, it's because he's come out and done that. Editing Ash here to say, wow, I am so shocked. A video called Finding Peace in the Noise, where it's all about you and how great you are and how everyone else is just after you. I can't believe it. Shocking turn of events here, but we'll talk more about the Piers Morgan and Megyn Kelly stuff and everything in just a few minutes. Even though he says he can't discuss the allegations in this new book, and he shouldn't, he does. He brings it up randomly and frequently and goes into like bizarre details and rants. In his original book, he talks about things that just sound horrendous, the way especially he talks about relationships with women and things. And I think those books might be at least interesting information for building the timeline and things like that, because he does go over a lot of women that he had relationships with and things, because a lot of the allegations against him are from women who did have consensual relationships with him to begin with, and later down the road was when he assaulted and raped them, allegedly. And he also tells stories in the original book that are just painting a picture of a horrendous, I know I keep using that word, but just he, in my opinion, is a horrendous human being. He talks in the book about how he would have this dog when he was younger, that when he got a new stepdad, the stepdad said, oh, the dog can't come upstairs, and he would like call and lure the dog upstairs so that he could kick the dog downstairs.
Russell Brand, what a...
He also claims he would do things like buy a mouse multiple times from a pet store so he could put it in his hair to get attention from women and say, oh, he had a mouse living in his hair. And he talks about how, you know, obviously a mouse is just going to go to the bathroom and things, and how he had this mouse like in his hair all the time because he used to like backcomb it like massively. And there was like a whole thing that he did about like a bird living in his hair. And so he would take this mouse like around in like a plastic container and like put it in there at night and then put it in his hair. Maybe the mouse thing is fake or exaggerated or something, but just the other stuff that he tells in the book and that I have seen with my own eyes, I just can't, like, why are you gonna make up one random story about a mouse when there's stories in the book about him going out on the street, and this was like in between his time in the UK where he was like well known and famous but like not massive and hadn't gone to the US yet, and he would basically not like man on the street interviews but just be like being an idiot in public. And so he's being filmed and he takes all his clothes off from like the waist down and he just has tidy whities on, and he's standing on a street in broad daylight and just urinates like on the street through his underwear and tries to like run up to this man who's like, you're sick, mate, like you're sick, which and he tries to like go up to the man and like hug him and try, and is like, oh, let me borrow your pants and stuff, or let me borrow your trousers. And it's things like that like what, like it is so insane to me that these are the things. Like, I know that's like a stupid thing, but the thought process of someone doing it, and I thinking about the fact that like I'm gonna have to send this to my friend who helps me edit and be like, can you find the clip of like this grown man like pissing in the street? Like, oof. Oh my god.
Wait, are we about to see that? Oh lord.
I normally edit the intro and she does the first half and I do the second half. Maybe I'll switch her around. Don't have to tell her to find this clip. But there is so many things like that over the years that I don't even know how to kind of just describe it, that he just would do things like in a meeting, pee in a bottle, like in full view of all of the staff, like guests. There was one time that's been, or one time at least that I know of that's been referenced, possibly more, where he did it in front of like all these guests at the BBC, and there was a kid there. And that's the thing, that there are these allegations against him that are absolutely disgusting, like awful allegations, but there is just also so much other surrounding stories and context that just paint the picture of a truly awful human being.
I mean, I feel a bit nervous. Okay. Oh, blimey. Right, I think this is how it works.
Oh, when you were at school, all the best looking girls now here are going out of 26-year-old men. But now that I am 26, I see the beauty of the system. I want to rape someone once.
Russell Brand's parents split when he was only 6 months old, and he is an only child. He was primarily raised by his mom, and he doesn't or didn't have a close relationship with his dad growing up. His dad would just disappear and then pop up like randomly now and again, and that would happen more in like his late teens, early 20s, because when he would pop up, he would be popping up to take Russell on a trip because one of his friends had dropped out, and these trips were sex trips. He and his father would go to places like Thailand, with the only prerogative being to sleep with prostitutes. His father would pay women to come back to a place where basically he and his father just partook in those activities very close and with earshot of one another, and that's what they did the entire time they were on these trips, and there are various, not interviews, but kind of like mini documentary things that Russell Brand has done over the years. There's one like Rebrand that he did, and they're always
Rebrand,
produced
literally.
by him, so it puts him in these glowing lights. And some of the very, very early ones from the like mid 2000s, before he goes to America, there are interviews of him with his dad where he goes into a lot of detail about these trips. And this is one thing that I think is going to really bite him, or already is kind of biting him, is that he thought he was so untouchable and has been so brazen over the years. And the way that Brand speaks about women in general in these interviews with his dad, where he's talking about going to Thailand and whatever he was doing there, to how he talks about women in his stand-up shows, to how he even speaks to politicians who are women when he started trying to go into politics, and all the other ways, like even on sets and behind the scenes videos and things, he, in my opinion, speaks to and about women as if they are nothing more than objects that he can procure. Even from an early age, when Brand had practically no power, he was still using the little power he had against others, especially against women. In his book, he details how long before he was famous, he had been kicked out of his second drama school, and he and his friend put together a play that they had never read so that they could hold auditions and they could get women to come in and kiss and undress as part of the audition process. When Brand did make it to MTV, he got his first real taste of power. He worked at MTV, as I said, from 2000 until the 12th of September 2001, and that same year he started at MTV. He also made his debut at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is a massive, massive comedy festival that any comedian in the UK who's made it has performed, and most do continue to perform at the Fringe. And a lot of people, even if you're not somebody who lives in the UK, you'll probably have heard of this festival because a lot of comedians like reference it, and even in recent shows like Baby Reindeer, they talk about the Fringe. When Brand was working at MTV, he had approached a 16-year-old girl who was entering the building to talk to one of her friends who worked in the building, and she'd been shopping at Topshop and had the bags in her hand, and Brand went straight up to her, took the shopping bags and rifled through them, took out a red dress and told her, "Wear this on a date with me tonight." He was in his 30s and she was 16. Brand has openly admitted to dating this 16-year-old while in his 30s, and he did so very recently on the Megyn Kelly show, and the girl has remained anonymous. I wonder why, but she has used an alias to tell her story, which is Alice, so that's what I'll refer to her as. She first told her story in a documentary put out through Channel 4 Dispatches called Russell Brand in Plain Sight, and this documentary came out in 2023, but they had been working on it since 2019, and the documentary coincided with an extensive investigation through the Times that came out at the same time. After the documentary and the Times piece came out, a number of other extensively researched, sourced and corroborated stories and investigations came out about Brand, and many more stories and articles and just people speaking out about him have come out through social media and other avenues. Alice detailed in the documentary how Brand allegedly groomed her, even instructing her what lies to tell her parents to get them to let her go and see him or whatever. He would tell her things like, "Oh, tell your parents that your friend is sick, or your friend needs you to go and do something," so that she could come and spend time with him. She also talked about how he would literally run lines with her so that she would say to her parents exactly what he wanted her to say. There have also been
I thought they were talking about like an acting job or something, but then I hear run lines with her so that he could manipulate her better. Okay.
allegations that Brand used the resources of places like the BBC and MTV to get cars to pick up the 16-year-old and bring her to him at work or at his home. Alice has said that she thoroughly believes that she was groomed by Brand, but in the beginning they did have consensual sex in their relationship.
Did they,
but
did they though? Here's my thing, and this is what I'm always like trying to be careful about, is can you really consent if you are essentially, it sounds like she was a teenager, unfortunately, and a victim of coercive control? I don't know.
Was not the case, and she has detailed in the documentary how Brand sexually assaulted her. Years later, when the relationship had long ended, Alice was working in television herself, and she said she was working on a project where it became evident that the producers wanted to hire Brand to host the show. Alice said that the vast majority of women in the room were immediately saying they did not want to work with Brand because of his past behavior, because of things they knew that he had done, and because of women that they knew that had been assaulted by Brand. And it's not even just the allegations. There's also countless stories about Brand doing things like peeing in bottles, also flashing on sets, going everywhere in only his underwear. And he frequently just held meetings, discussed things, everything in his underwear. And there's also loads of stories from people about how he would just be completely inappropriate and just take out his genitalia and flash people constantly on set and say things and just be all around creepy, not even taking into account the actual long list of allegations against him. The producers decided that they were going to hire Brand, but they were just going to compromise by making a rule that Brand not be alone with any woman, and that all the women would have walkie-talkies.
What?
And there also are other stories over the years that there isn't like black and white proof of this, but there's been a lot of like newspapers, for example, that really stand by this story, and that was that Brand had in his contract that he was not allowed to have any physical relationships with people who worked on his shows, and yet that went on for a number of years on most of the shows that he produced, or not produced, but shows that he worked on in the UK. But I don't have any like, oh, this is absolutely something that I 100% know that happened. That's just something that's always been very widely reported. In 2004, Brand got his first really big hosting gig that started putting him into the proper celebrity category, and that was when he was giving the hosting gig of Big Brother's Big Mouth. In 2004, it was known by E-Forum just, and then later they did change it to Big Brother's Big Mouth, and it basically was like an after show to Big Brother, which was absolutely massive at this stage, because Big Brother did like start in the UK, and so after the like main show, especially on a Friday, they would have this show that they would have the eliminated house guests on. They'd have like other celebrities on,
so he was
and
a Big Brother
like they always
guy.
had a live audience and
like
stuff.
Andrew Tate.
And
good.
actually James Corden was someone who hosted it after Russell Brand, so there must be some like horrendous person who hosts Big Brother after show to US pipeline.
I didn't say it.
Apologies to the US. This is when I really first became aware of him, because it was literally like this show came out, I think like a month or maybe not even, when I moved to the US. It was the summer of 2004, so I remember like seeing him vaguely, and on first glance I absolutely despised him.
That's kind of how I felt though too.
Maybe like 5 people that
but
just
I was like, oh, he's
the
funny,
second that I see them there, and it's definitely vibes, like horrendous vibes. I have always really disliked him, and I'm just like not someone like I don't even really use the word like hate or anything, but
Yeah, I
just the
get you.
second that I saw him, I
Sure.
was like, major bad vibes. I had a friend who really liked him, so I think that's really like the only way I kind of like knew anything about him, because when I moved to the US, he completely was off my radar. Like I didn't know anything about him because he was really doing like a lot of reality stuff, and then he was doing like more of the comedy scene, and I wasn't looking or seeking out anything with
Wild.
him. And so when
What
he
the
popped
hell?
up in Forgetting Sarah Marshall in 2007,
I remember that,
I remember
actually.
being like, this fucking guy has
Yeah.
made it. There's just so many talented people in
that's-
the UK,
that's
and
more
especially
what
like
I
comedians
remember
and
him
stuff,
from.
and so few make it in the US because, you know, there's so much more competition and everything, and like that is the dream of like a lot of UK people. I mean, some are very happy to stay in the UK, but it is like, if you can make it in the US, like that's like a lot of bands too, you know.
Yep,
The Spice
that's
Girls
true.
and stuff, like there are very few that blow up so massively in the US, but if they do, they're kind of seen like on another level in the UK because it's like, you made it in the US, you know. And I really remember like going to see Forgetting Sarah Marshall
Yeah, me
because
too.
unsurprisingly, like I love going to the
hell?
movies, and I have
Damn
talked
it,
about
I'm
how I used
sorry,
to
I'm
even
Butterfingers today.
manage all the AMCs in Tampa. And I remember I was like a freshman or a sophomore, and going on like an
I thought you lived in
afternoon, and there was like
Australia
no
or
one
Britain or
else in the
something.
theater,
England.
and I was with my ex-girlfriend, and when he came on, I think even just when his name came on, I remember turning to her and being like, this fucking it's like, I can't stand him, I can't believe he's in this movie. And because that was when like all the Apatow movies, you know, like Knocked Up and everything it was like really hot, and I just remember
I
thinking,
remember
like,
it.
how
I
the
remember
hell
back
has
in the
this
day.
happened? And that's
You know
honestly
what?
how
Like,
I look
here's
at his
the thing.
career
I'm
in general.
I'm not gonna like
because
fully.
how the hell
I'm not gonna
has
fully
any of this
blame
happened, but
Judd Apatow for him. He was kind of forced on us though. Like I was like, oh, he is funny, but like my first reaction to him was like she said, kind of like, ooh, I'm not sure about this guy. It's I don't know. Like he can be really funny, but it always seems like it's at the expense of somebody else. Never laughing at. And even his like alleged self-deprecating humor is very you deprecating, not him deprecating. It's a lot.
it's not even
My
the fact
opinion.
that he is just like this
Etc.
random UK comedian who I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like I have never got it about him, but
No,
also the fact
same.
that he has done such horrendous
He
things,
has.
not even taking into account the allegations.
Truly, yeah.
Like, because what we're gonna talk about now is the other times that he was fired and how he was kind of ran out of the UK. Maybe not ran out, but he had come to the end of the line with opportunities in the UK because there was a massive controversy with his firing from the BBC.
Yes.
Also,
there
my
was.
regular viewers know I am contractually obligated to mention
I love
my
her.
mortal enemy Ashton Kutcher
Ah!
in every video.
Oh my god,
So,
yes.
Mila
Her Ashton
Kunis,
bitches are
Russell Brand,
videos are
Jonah
really good.
Hill,
You guys should check them out.
Jason Segel, that's a video for another day. On the set of Forgetting
Her
Sarah Marshall,
Ashton
I can't imagine
videos
what
are
a
awesome.
cursed set. Beaten only by the following movie, Get Him to the Greek. I wouldn't say like a sequel, maybe like a spin-off from that movie that had Russell Brand, Jonah Hill, and Diddy. Back-to-back
Oof.
cursed sets.
Nope, no.
As I said,
That
in
is the most
2004
cursed blunt
was
rotation
when
I've ever
Brand
heard
got
of.
this
Yeah.
Big Brother after show,
Yeah.
and that same year he was given a BBC radio show, and
Oh,
he was
man.
doing a lot more stand-up as well. He'd been to the Fringe a number of times again, and in 2006 and 2007 he had back-to-back stand-up tours. One was called
Yeah,
Shame
that's
in
right.
2006 and the other was Only Joking, and these are so painfully unfunny and absolutely
they really are.
disgusting.
That is
Again,
true.
researching this, like, it just made me crawl.
I looked at some of it like after I heard about all of the allegations, and it's unfunny, but it's also very like self-confessing, if that makes sense. Yeah.
With disgust, like they're horrendous a
Yeah.
lot of these clips. The period 2004 to 2007 is when he really explodes in the UK, and with all the money and power and fame, he used every single drop of it to take advantage and exploit as many women as possible. In my opinion, many comedians in the UK have spoken about the fact that it was a very open secret about Brand's behavior, and there have even been male comedians in the UK who, when you look at them speaking about Brand now with the context of today, it's very evident that they don't like him. I mean, there's so many examples of this I can give you. Like, obviously, other comedians, when they're talking about someone, like, you know, you can see like, oh, they're making fun of each other or like poking fun, or sometimes, you know,
Usually
if
all in good
Jimmy Carr comes up, who
fun,
I'm sure like a lot of US people would know him too. He got done for tax evasion and stuff.
That's
So
right.
if he comes up and he's not there, you know, somebody will make like a tax joke or something. But whenever Russell Brand comes up, you can see that it's different, the way that the other comedians talk about him. And
they
especially
don't like him.
a lot of like the
don't.
really staple male comedians. There's a man who was called Sean Locke. He actually passed away in 2021, but very funny, like very dry humor, and someone who was every Friday on a lot of like the British panel shows. There's one 8 out of 10 Cats, then they have 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown, and that one's like the panel show, but they have like a game. Countdown is like an absolute British staple on daytime TV show. And so Sean Locke, to give like a specific example, there's a episode of 8 out of 10 Cats where Russell Brand comes up, and just the way he talks about him, I'll put a clip in here. It will have to be very short because I am being assassinated by copyright at the moment. They're using AI now, and so they will just claim like
even when it's
anything.
not
My
they've
Glee video is actually
me on my own music
blocked globally, not even demonetized, blocked. And I'm gonna have to hopefully wait a month for the claim, because they will just claim seconds, even though you're completely in your right through fair use to use clips.
That's
but
right.
also there's like false ones too. So my Ellen one was claimed from National Geographic. I've had all these other videos claimed. So I have said I'm working with a company that I'll talk about soon, where to try and not be so dependent on copyright taking things down, and then, you know,
hopefully
like this is my main job, my editors. And anyway, just to say that it will be a short clip, but that's the reason why I promise that I'm.
Fingers crossed.
It's an unfortunate thing, but it's just the nature of the platform now.
Is the most moronic, self-serving, pathetic bit of attention-seeking wank that has ever.
I've watched 8 out of 10 Cats so much for years and years, and Sean Locke is someone who's on it all the time. A lot of those comedians are on it all the time, and just seeing the way that they're talking about him and the reactions, it's not like the normal bits that they do.
Probably the reason I hate him so much is because I'm a dad, and I've got this fear that one day my daughters will bring something like that home.
I say that because there have also been actual times that comedians have said stuff to Russell Brand's face in shows and said, I believe that you are a sexual officer. I believe that you have assaulted women. But of course it's cut out, but they can't erase from other people's minds that happened. Probably the most well-known example of this, Brand being confronted by another comedian on a show, was when he was confronted by Catherine Ryan. Now, Catherine Ryan hasn't actually explicitly said that it was Russell Brand that this happened with, but I mean, it's extremely obvious. She has even talked to Louis Theroux, who I'm sure most people know
didn't know that.
UK people absolutely know him, but more recently he did the Manosphere
Interesting.
documentary. He is a fantastic documentarian, and
He
if you
is.
haven't seen his other stuff, highly recommend.
So-
My sister that likes about 5 things and 5 shows and 5 celebrities in the world, one of her favorite people is Louis Theroux. But
Okay.
this situation happened like years back, and Catherine
Interesting.
Ryan, she again will be probably pretty known to British people, especially that watch like a lot of the panel shows and stuff. And she does have like a Netflix show and everything now. She's actually Canadian, but she moved to the UK when she was 23, and she's a little bit older than me. And she originally like moved for a relationship because her partner wanted to be a comedian, and then she became a comedian. And she has this situation where she is not as like well known as she is now, and like doesn't have her Netflix show or anything like that. And she is someone that like, you know, she's on a lot of stuff. She's always working,
Pardon me.
and she, you know, has kids and everything. And so she gets offered to do this, it's like a multi-comedian show, and
Okay.
she hears that Brand is going to be on it. And so she sits with it for a while, and she's like, do I do this show with this person that I believe is
Right.
a sexual abuser? Because
Yeah.
she has said this person that she's talking about, this comedian, that she has many people, like friends and people she knows in the comedy circuit, women that have had situations happen with Brand. And so she decides, well, I'm going to go because, and I'm going to do it because I'm not going to not work because of this guy, but I'm also not going to not say anything.
Right.
And so they go to the taping of this show, and like I said, there's lots of other comedians there. Like, it's a lot of the most well-known British comedians, and the audience is like hundreds of people, and obviously there's crew and everything there too. And so in this show, she actually says something to him about, I believe that you're a sexual assaulter and all of this. And there's again
Okay.
hundreds of people that hear this, not only just the crew, the audience. And
Interesting.
what do you know, it gets cut from the show. And not only is it cut from the show, but Russell Brand, he's in like that episode, but he disappears from the show. And so the film crew, like, I definitely can imagine, you know, something that like that happens, like a female comedian that's well known confronts Russell Brand, who is a very well known, like in movies and all of that. I can imagine people were talking about it, but also those hundreds of people in the
Yeah.
audience, they probably were talking about it too.
Right.
And this isn't 20 years ago. This is only a few years ago. I think this is 2018 this happened in, or maybe 2017, but they talked about it in 2018.
Damn.
And so if I went to a taping and I saw that, I'm talking about it. I'd probably be on here telling you about it the night that it happened. But I absolutely would. But the people in the audience, especially when they watch the show and it's not in it, then it all starts to filter out. And so it did become very well known that it was Russell Brand, but there's actually like a point where when Louis Theroux is interviewing Catherine Ryan about this, she starts off by saying, yeah, we can talk about it, but it's a litigious minefield because of who he is. And Catherine Ryan confronted him and did this in 2018, long before the documentary, the Times article, like anything came out. And also even the year before they started working on the documentary. And so I think that is extremely admirable, especially because she got in a lot of trouble for saying that, and because she dealt with backlash as well. She did actually confirm in her tour from about a year and a bit ago. It could have been that she's mentioned it in other tours as well, but that's like the information that I have. She did confirm on the tour that it was Brand that she was speaking about.
Well,
But
yeah,
she
I mean,
also
good for
talks about
her.
how she got in trouble and had to deal with backlash and pushback from him. And again, he's very litigious. And so it was not an easy thing to do. And I know maybe some people will say, oh, you've gone into too much detail here, but I do think it is so important to highlight things like this, because this is someone speaking up. This is someone doing the really hard thing in 2018, long before anything else had come out in the mainstream. Yes, it was extremely well known behind the scenes, but to say something to his face and to do it on a TV show, that takes real guts. And everything would be a lot better if there was a lot more people that, especially, you know, she is a successful comedian. She is on a lot of these panels, and, you know, I think that it is so admirable to see someone stand up for probably a lot of her friends and a lot of people that she knows in the industry that did have these horrible things happen with Russell Brand, allegedly. And that is very difficult to do to someone who has a lot more star power, a lot more money, a lot more connections, and, as she said, is extremely litigious, because Russell Brand, whether it's people that have been assaulted by him, people that have even just spoken about things they've seen, Russell Brand comes down on them like a ton of bricks with his lawyers. There have been so many things that I've read researching this video where it's been like, and I was threatened with lawyers, and we had to take this out because he was threatening lawyers, and, you know, he's sending lawyers this way, that way, because there have been other situations from either crew or audience members where there have even just been jokes or comments, and he loves to give off this impression that he's one of the people and against the mainstream media and this, and like, oh, you know, easygoing, carefree, just wellness guru guy. I mean, multi-millionaire threatening people with his lawyers over jokes. That sounds pretty 1% to me. In 2007, Brand ends up going to rehab for a second time, and this is around the time that he's filming the movie Saint Trinians, which is the movie that he filmed in the UK before going to the US and doing Forgetting Sarah Marshall the next year. He ended up going to rehab twice, once for substances and another time, this time for sex addiction. And this rehab stint wasn't really done because there was an avalanche of complaints, and all of his behavior behind the scenes, how he was treating people, it was because it started to interfere with the money, because he was doing things on set, in his dressing room, in the toilets, that were causing delays and things like that. And he was actually having runners who are normally like the bottom of the pyramid on set, and a lot of the time like young people who are trying to get started in the industry, he would have them go and get phone numbers from the people or the women that he had pointed out in the audience. So if he's doing his Big Brother Big Mouth show, he would literally tell the runners, oh, go and get that girl's number. And so when he was doing this 5-6 times a night, or even sending them like hotel numbers or room numbers and key cards and stuff, then that's when his agent ended up sending him again to rehab for sex addiction, because it was the agent who had sent him the first time in the early 2000s for substances.
Quick, as somebody with a psychology degree, like, sex addiction is, you know, unless there's brand new science out here that I am just completely, just totally blissfully unaware of, it is still looked at askance. It's not looked at as like something that is particularly credible, in so much as, sure, anybody could technically be addicted to anything, but it's like corn addiction, right? It's not addictive, right? So it's a little, it's looked at a little, looked at askance, like I said. That's all I can say. It's It's like, okay, well, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to tell you what you are and aren't kind of addicted to, but yeah, that's all I'm saying. So I'm not trying to tell you your business, but it's odd. Okay, we'll put it that way.
Rehab. When it comes to his BBC radio
sounds
show,
like an excuse,
he
frankly,
was
to
telling
me,
people
personally.
constantly exactly who he is. He non-stop was divulging the horrendous behavior he took part in. He constantly spoke awfully about women. He was just vile on that radio. But there's two really big things that people cite when they talk about his radio show, and one is a story about Jimmy Savile and another is about Andrew Sachs, who both of these people are like very well known in the UK. Jimmy Savile, a lot of American people might have heard of him because he is probably the most prolific in UK history. He was a celebrity in like the 70s and 80s. He is another person that on site, it's like, this is an absolute creep.
Yes.
And he actually, I mentioned him in my former Prince Andrew video because he was another person that the royal family just absolutely loved. There's actually a letter that King Charles wrote Jimmy Savile saying basically the people of Britain will never know how much you've done for them, Jimmy.
Yikes.
Because he actually like was even
troubling.
Interviewing like staff that were trying to get jobs at the palace, like Prince Charles's significant staff members. Absolutely horrendous. There's a Netflix documentary about him if you want to know more. It's horrendous, like very prolific. So there's a time that Jimmy Savile calls into the show,
I know it's
and
bad,
I'll put a few little
yikes.
clips in, but again, copyright. And Jimmy Savile and Russell Brand basically are bantering, and Russell says, "Oh, I'd love to meet you, Jimmy." And this is before it was out publicly about Savile, but I mean, again, it's another like open secret. And Jimmy says on the radio basically, "Oh, I don't meet men, but if you have a sister, like, yeah, you can come then if you like introduce me to your sister."
Don't like to hear that.
And Russell says like, "Oh,
Don't like
I
to hear
don't have a
that.
sister, but I
Nope.
have an assistant who will basically do whatever I tell her to, whether it's meet someone, massage them, whatever."
I've got a personal assistant called Marsha, and part of her job description is that anyone I demand she greets, meets, massages, she has to do it. She's very attractive, Jimmy.
And so he's like, "Oh, do you want her to wear anything in particular, Jimmy?" And Jimmy Savile's like, "Oh, I want her to wear nothing."
Send her along to do some research.
Would you like her to wear anything in particular, Sir Jimmy?
I'd actually prefer her to wear nothing.
And it's just unbelievably disgusting to listen to. And the other really well-known situation, this is the most well-known and had the biggest consequences because this is actually what got Russell Brand fired from the BBC. And this was when he and Jonathan Ross, his usual co-host, which is like one of his producing partners, Russell Brand's producing partners, wasn't there. And so Jonathan Ross is like another well-known chat show host. He's probably like the closest thing. Him and Graham Norton does like amazing interviews and shows. Jonathan Ross is kind of like a Jimmy Kimmel or something like that that the UK has. And so Jonathan Ross and Russell Brand are on the show, and they were supposed to interview this actor Andrew Sachs, who is very well known for a British comedy show called Fawlty Towers. He played this character Emmanuel.
Yeah, I like Fawlty Towers.
My parents really loved it. And so he ends up not doing the interview, and so they call Andrew Sachs like his voicemail, and so they leave this message where they basically say oh, I can't believe like you backed out of the interview, and also Russell slept with your granddaughter.
What?
And they, you know, do all like these other stupid like lines and stuff. And then that got, I think,
Lord have
44,000 complaints. Like, people were so pissed because they were being like vile and gross. And the granddaughter, who was kind of like known, you know, like kind of like nepo baby known, she ends up actually developing a substance addiction from like the fallout of all of this. And years later, Brand did actually pay for her to go to rehab. But the whole situation at the BBC, like, there was a massive just media storm around this. It happened over the summer. Obviously I was living in the US, but I even remember hearing about it like from the UK media I followed and like friends and stuff like that. And Brand was fired from his show. Jonathan Ross got like temporarily put on leave, and the woman who like oversaw the production of the show was let go as well. And that happened, and then all of a sudden he's in Hollywood filming Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And I do really think that it is so unbelievable, like I said, that he is someone who was successful in Hollywood, but also the fact that he was kind of done in the UK. Like, he had been fired from so many jobs, and he had started to fuck with the money, so that meant that he wasn't getting stuff anymore. That's why he pivots and goes out there, and next thing you know, he's in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Get Him to the Greek, and then the next minute he's is engaged and marries Katy Perry like practically overnight. With meeting Diddy through Get Him to the Greek, Brand and Diddy became close friends, and would vacation together. There's videos of them on private jets and calling each other like close friends. And according to a lot of the allegations and people that have spoken out about Brand, it seems as though his behavior continued to escalate when he got to the US. And just like there have been many women in the UK who have alleged that Brand assaulted, attacked and raped them, there have been many women in the US who have claimed he did those things to them as well. So to discuss the specific allegations, the trial, and also what's happened the last few days with the Megyn Kelly and Piers Morgan interviews, Brand actually just had his trial pushed. It was supposed to happen in just a few months in June, and it's actually been pushed out because there have been more allegations that have come forward. He denies all claims, and he stands accused of 3 charges of sexual assault and 1 of indecent assault, with 6 women in total alleging these crimes criminally between 1999 and 2009. But just like Danny Masterson and many others we've spoken about on the channel, while Brand is facing multiple rapes in court, there have been even more allegations against him when it comes to just people speaking out in documentaries, in articles, interviews, every manner of way, including in a book that was published by one of his ex-girlfriends, Jordan Martin, that was called Not. It's a fictional book, but it's a very thinly veiled fictional book. I think the main character is even called something like Brussels Rand.
Oh my goodness,
and
that's
it
on the
talks
nose.
In a
Quite
lot
on the
of
nose.
detail about a horrendous relationship and him being a celebrity and everything like that. And there are many other women who've spoken out, and this again did continue allegedly in the US. There's a woman in the documentary who claims in 2012 that after they had finished filming something, she had left her stuff at Brand's house, and she said they were friends. They had previously had a consensual relationship. They weren't like in a relationship, but they had consensually hooked up before. She said that when they went back to Brand's house, he had raped her, and there was other people outside of the house at the time, like colleagues of his, and she was screaming and screaming, and no one intervened. And she said years later she ran into one of these people who pulled her aside and said, "I've never forgiven myself. I heard you screaming, but we were all so scared of him, we didn't know what to do." In the documentary, the woman uses the pseudonym Phoebe, and she did go on after the attack to receive medical care and even had a rape kit performed straight away. And she did not pursue charges because she didn't want to put her family and herself through that because of him being a celebrity. And this even appears in the medical document that she gave to the documentary crew. It actually has in her medical notes, and she gave the whole thing all about what happened. And it also has a reference saying she reported that the situation for her was even more complicated due to the assailant's celebrity status. But wait, there's even more, because she also had text messages from right after it happened from Brand, the first being sent at 3:29 a.m. on July 1st, 2012, and the message reads, "I'm sorry, that was crazy and selfish. I hope you can forgive me. I know that you're a lovely person. Kiss." And multiple journalists have verified that these text messages came from Brand's number. She replied with a longer message that in part read, "You scared the shit out of me. You're right. I am a lovely person. And for you to take advantage of me, that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
You have a problem. You need help. It's dangerous. You think that you can get your way all the time. Do you know how scary you look when that glazed look comes over you? When a girl says no, it means no." And when you look at like all of the alleged victims speaking out, all of them report this glazed look and his eyes going dark, and none of these women know each other. None of them have spoken. Nothing like that. Like, this information wasn't out anywhere publicly before the documentary, and they all report the same thing. And as I said, Phoebe, that is the name that she was using in the documentary, no, she didn't go to the cops because she didn't want to go through anything more. And especially a celebrity and him in 2012, like, look at what people are put through in all of the cases that I've talked about with sexual assault on this channel. And this is with kits that's reported, with text messages, with years and years and years of people reporting these things to one another, talking about it, all of that. And still people question whether there's any truth. Well, a lot of people don't even question it. They just say, no, he's completely innocent. And that text message isn't alone in isolation. There are plenty of others that there have been attacks and he sent similar messages to other women. They're combined with everything else in the documentary, all the articles, the interviews, and everything throughout the industry that had been discussed for 30 years almost. So many people have spoken about Brand's behavior, and that's why I said at the beginning of the video that he was enabled by countless people. Even if you listen to his Radio 2 show, he literally was saying the most vile and disgusting things, even about news presenters that were working at the BBC in the same building. And those people would complain, and not only would nothing happen, he would continue to go on the radio and say what he was wanting to do to these people and just be absolutely vile. Because not only was he allowed to get away with it, but then he was actually handed production of the show. So he had no oversight whatsoever. I mean, in his book, he goes into details about sleeping with competition winners at the BBC in the bathrooms of the BBC that the controller fully knew about, according to him. And there's also stories from people that worked with him over the years in PA capacities or makeup or other support capacities, And they said that they witnessed things like women calling the studio after he had met up with them or given them his hotel room or whatever the night before and lied to them. And a lot of them were late teens, very early 20s, and they'd call the studio and be asking for him or reporting what happened. The women in the documentary and plenty of other women who aren't in the documentary and aren't 6 of the women that he's facing charges over, they have spoken out about how they did call his publishers, the BBC, Channel 4, producers, networks, everything else, and report what happened. When people did speak out, they were completely shut down. They tried to speak to people behind the scenes. Women in the room spoke about not wanting to work with him, not wanting to hire him. The 16-year-old he admittedly slept with actually called his publishers when she was a grown woman and heard that he was doing another book to say, do you know who you're doing business with? And she was told, oh, he's on a wellness retreat right now, but we'll call you back. And instead what she got back was a very rude, blunt email from Brown's lawyers that even started not for publishing and vaguely threatening, and the lawyer completely tried to shut her down by saying, I suspect that you're trying to get money from him, when she had never said anything about money. She was literally just saying, this is what happened. The amount of people that must have known about Brand has to be astronomical. And there's all manner of people that will have known over the years, especially now that people do feel a bit more emboldened to speak out because it is going through the courts and things. And after that case, I think there will be an absolute tsunami of people coming out, because as I said, in the UK the contempt of court thing like really holds people back. Like, I listened to this podcast that I've mentioned before, The Rest is Entertainment, that's hosted by Richard Osmond, who writes the Thursday Murder Club books, and he has been like a host on lots of quiz shows and stuff. He's very well known in the UK, and I feel like this is like a education in like British television random stuff. And the other host is Marina Hyde, who is a very well-respected journalist at The Guardian. She's worked at other places too, and she also has worked on a lot of American TV shows. She had written for The Franchise, which is a show that was on HBO that was like behind the scenes of like a superhero show, and she's someone who has kind of worked in the industry in various places and ways, and she's absolutely a well of knowledge on a plethora of different subjects and bits of the industry. And their podcast is extremely interesting to listen to. And don't hold this against her, but she is very close friends with Piers Morgan, which we'll get into in a second. I filmed the first half of this video yesterday, and it's the 28th today. And while I was literally getting ready, I was playing the new episode of their podcast, and especially knowing the relationship between Marina and Piers, and Marina being a journalist, they start the episode saying, you know, we're going to talk about Russell Brand's book and him going on Piers Morgan, and they're saying like we can't talk about the actual charges and things, but there are multiple points throughout the episode where you can see, especially Marina, like biting her tongue, and they keep saying like, when the court case concludes, like, we will do like a proper
it still hasn't
deep dive episode about it. And I would be very interested to listen to that episode, because I feel like in general they're both two people who are so saturated in the industry. They're a good bit old, not a good bit, but they're
by the way, I mentioned this before, but I am just setting up right now for some scam baiting, hopefully tomorrow morning, maybe. Obviously I have to kind of keep, like, I'm kind of constrained doing live streams that are related to scam baiting by like when Nigerians are up, you know, so like kind of the earlier the better. Let me know if you want to see the text that I'm sending out. I don't know if that's of interest, but
older than me,
I'm
and
happy
they've
to
been
show
around
you.
for a very long time. Richard has worked
Yeah,
on
Richard's awesome.
so many British shows because he was
Great.
like a producer before he was a host.
Yeah.
And he's
I've
gone
seen him
on
before.
so many of those like 8 out of 10
Like,
cat
many
shows
times.
and all the different panel shows and things. And then Marina, like being a journalist and the places that she's worked in, she
Yeah,
did
she's done a
actually
lot of stuff,
work
too.
at the Sun when she was like really, really younger. She actually got
That's cool.
let go from the Sun for like Piers Morgan something. So I would say there would be a very interesting episode of that down the road. And I think that there will be so many things like that. People that have just had to bite their tongue for many, many years. Catherine Ryan, perfect example too, because she has now come out, as I mentioned, and said it was Russell Brand when she's on her tour, where, you know, there's certain things that
ridiculous, though.
you
Like,
only say
the
with
fact that he's
certain
that fucking
audiences,
litigious.
and if she's saying on a tour too, she knows it's not going to be clipped and like blasted out. I've said plenty of stuff on my Patreon that I wouldn't in a video. Some of it is because people don't want it in a YouTube video, or like it's names of people, or it's stories that just are for for a smaller audience. And then there's stuff that is like really juicy and a really good story, but it just doesn't fit in a video. Like I haven't covered anything that would slot it in somewhere with like a show or a person. So it just depends that way. But I definitely think that there are a lot of people biding their time to wait for this case to conclude so that they can speak out, because Catherine Ryan and other female comics have said that even when they were doing like a lot of jokes about the situation with Brand, that they were told in no uncertain terms,
Really?
do not do any more
Pardon
of
me.
these jokes, because Brand had complained about them.
Okay.
And
No, we're
of
good.
course he
We're good.
is very, very wealthy and has lots of lawyers.
Wow.
So I say again,
Shocking.
someone who is a multi-millionaire shutting down people talking about things and threatening people with lawyers. I mean, it doesn't sound more 1%er or elite to me, even though he's always going on about the elite. And while there are plenty of people like runners
He's
and
the elite, in
PAs
my
that
opinion.
couldn't really have done much, or people like the female comics where it is just better for them to protect each other and warn each other because they are being shut down constantly. But there's plenty of people who could have done something, who could have not hired him, who could have spoken out, who could have not benefited from him coming in and working, or even people that benefited from their relationship with him and friendship and whatever. Many of these people, like other comics that he was really close with, or other presenters like Noel Fielding, or other journalists that he hung around with, or his other writing partners, they have now started to very loosely admit that they did see sometimes inappropriate things, but they leave it just very vague and will say, oh, well,
That's
sometimes I had to
unfortunate,
say something to him about
You know, come on.
saying this to a woman, and they don't
He should
really
know he's a
go
grown
into any
person.
detail, because I
Enough,
think
like-
that they're kind of laying
Nah,
the
dude.
foundation
No.
for,
No.
oh, I
You're an
wasn't
adult,
really
you
that
should
close to
know.
him, or I did say something, or I didn't see anything. This is the exact same thing as like Danny Masterson and Diddy and all the other people that we've spoken about. It's not like you or I that
Alright,
I've said this
let's see.
before. There could be someone that we're friends with that works in a bank and is an absolute monster, and you don't know about it. But this is Hollywood and the British comedy circuit, and these people all know, they all talk about it. And even the fact that this stuff gets to such heights that it's even
Okay,
in
hopefully y'all can hear
blinds,
me
and
still.
yes, you can't read all blinds, but you can go to Reddit forums like FOMOA and pop
Yeah,
culture and
true.
stuff, and you see
True.
years back the Danny Mastersons,
Okay,
the
let's
Russell
go
Brand,
ahead.
the Diddy, like the stories that just completely line up with everything that's come out. And I'm not saying that like, oh, you can believe everything that's on these forums and stuff like that, but when there is just a consistent pattern for years and years and years, and people saying the exact same thing across the board, there are these comments, there are these people that don't work with people, or all of it, like, this stuff doesn't come out of nowhere. And people like Danny Masterson, when their friends do act completely shocked, I just find it so hard to believe, because it's not like their friends working in a bank they have no knowledge of. It's Hollywood, it's out there, it's talked about, and if it isn't, someone will tell you about it, because image is everything. Your reputation, sorry, a really loud bike just went past. Your reputation is everything.
So annoying.
You're gonna know about it, in my opinion. And to give a specific example of what I mean, there is a podcast called The Nudes Agents that's got 3 journalists as the hosts. One is Emily Maitlis, who did the famous Prince Andrew or ex-Prince Andrew interview, and see my former Prince Andrew video for this, but Emily Maitlis and Sam McAllister that put together the Newsnight interview with former Prince Andrew, their, in my opinion, fictitious story is very different from what actually happened with them procuring that interview. But regardless of that, Emily Maitlis is a good interviewer, and she had this interview. She has interviewed Russell Brand before,
yeah,
and she really went after him
him
and pushed him, and he is just like so dismissive and demeaning to her. But she, about a year ago, had an interview on the Nudes Agents that was with a journalist called Gordon Smart, who used to be the editor of The Sun, and he also was the person who gave Russell Brand Shagger of the Year award 3 years in a row. And he likes to talk in the interview about how, you know, he's not a tabloid journalist anymore, and he didn't create the Shagger of the Year award, he just gave it to him. And he was friends with Russell Brand too, and in the interview he talks about how he didn't see anything that is talked about like in the documentary, but there were plenty of times that he had to call Russell out, or his treatment of people and like things that he heard. I mean, can you imagine what a journalist at The Sun who was friends with Russell Brand was seeing and hearing, and yet still continued to hang around with him? I'm being absolutely cursed here. My mic wasn't like, I don't know what happened, but it wasn't recording, so I'm having to re-record this bit. So I need to talk even more about Russell Brand. So this video is a declaration of my love for having to put up with Russell Brand and all his interviews, which we're going to get into now, because by the mid-2010s, Brand had burned even more bridges, and it seemed like he was not wanted for work in Hollywood anymore. He had an odd bit of voice work in the like mid-2010s, but it was from work that he'd been hired from before. So like Despicable Me, that he was the voice of Dr. Nefario, that he was actually replaced for the 4th one. He did like the first 3 and the prequel Rise of Gru, but he was replaced by another British comedian, Ramesh Ragnathan, and there was no like announcement or promotion even by like Ramesh about Brand being replaced and Ramesh coming into the role, because I'm assuming that Universal wanted to quickly and quietly replace him and try and let it go unnoticed by as many people as possible. So in the mid-2010s, when he's not really getting the work anymore, he starts to transition into this like wellness guru, non-politics guy that talks about politics, and he starts to do a lot of like his own shows like Brand X and just like other random things that he was fully in control of and producing. In 2017, he gets married to Laura Goucher, and I believe she's the daughter of a professional golfer, Bernard Goucher, and her sister is a well-known like sports presenter from like the late 90s, Kirsty Goucher. And you won't see this part talked about when it comes to his marriage. He just loves to say that he's married and has 3 kids now, and he actually dated his wife when she was 18 and he was in his 30s, and they dated for like a few months, and then he didn't want to be monogamous, so they reconnected when Laura was, well, they reconnected the day that her ex moved out. And there's actually a quote from Laura saying that she went out for like a walk with a friend and he just like appeared as if he had been like there to meet them.
So
and there's also this quote that I read from her that it's probably just like a total coincidence that she said this specific thing, but she talks about the day that she met him that she had mascara running down her face. And there is a joke that he used to say in so much of his stand-up, and it's actually what the documentary Russell Brand in Plain Sight opens with, and it is absolutely vile. It is, and it's repeated so many times, that he basically is saying that he gets a lot of enjoyment when a woman is performing a certain act and basically starts to like gag and choke, and when her mascara starts to run down her face. And there is so many other like vile things that he talks about in his show, and he's like fully doing like a reenactment of it and everything. But as I said, he does have 3 kids now, and another amazing quote from him is that he loves to talk about how he's never actually cared for his children by himself for 24 hours. A quote from him is, "Laura does all of it. It turns out she's extremely well versed in nuances and complexities of child rearing. Me, I'm dedicated to it, devoted to it, but I'm still surprised when it's like, oh my god, this is really fucking hard and it's so exhausting." As most people will be aware, in 2020, Bran leaned really into social media, and his YouTube channel has over 6.5 million subscribers, and he does also post a lot on Rumble and go live there. He was demonetized for a period, but I think he's remonetized. He posts every single day, and I know there were a lot of channels that were demonetized around like COVID stuff that were remonetized again, and people that were taken off the platform and brought back. So given that he's posting so much, I definitely think that he's monetized. He loves to talk about how his speaking the truth is what's made these allegations come out. But as we've discussed in the video, they came out and have been talked about long before COVID, or he started speaking the truth, and the documentary was in the works long before that too. After the allegations came out in 2023, he pivoted into being extremely religious, and he now walks around with various props to illustrate this. Like he wears an enormous cross around his neck, and he always has a Bible with him, even bringing one into court when he was charged. And of course he did have one on Piers Morgan, which we're going to talk about now. I know some really religious people that their religion's very important to them. I mentioned in the last video, I've known Kayleigh McEnany since high school. She's very religious, and even in high school, she was religious and has always worn like a silver cross on her neck.
We've got numbers to call.
People I know that are religious don't walk around with a Bible. Like, they have one at their house, and like when they're doing religious studies. I mean, my high school is called the Academy of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary. And unless it was like a religious class, like Catholic studies or Catholic lifestyle something, we had a class about that. Let me tell you, the nuns were not a fan of me in that class. And they, oh god, just thinking about that, it's, oh god. Stories for another day, like the Kayleigh McEnany thing. I do have my high school reunion next month though, so maybe some stories coming soon. But this has really bitten Russell Brand after him walking around with his Bible all the time, because he just was on Piers Morgan's show and he went viral for what he was doing with his Bible.
Like, you know, me as well. Maybe we are a couple of grifters, a couple of worthless, lousy grifters that will say whatever we have to say to stay on the internet, make a few quid and flog a book, and oh, Meghan Markle!
He has been going on several talk shows that are people like Piers Morgan, Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, that were formerly in the mainstream media and now are on like their own platforms on social media and like YouTube and stuff. And Piers Morgan is one of the very few like mainstream media people who has pivoted into YouTube and content creation and done extremely well. Like he has to be absolutely printing money, and it's because he's done it in the right way. Like, he's done it with people who know about content creation and not just gone like the Laura Prepon route or something like that, where they hire these obscenely expensive Hollywood people who don't know anything about social media. Brand has been going, it seems, on a lot of friendly fire shows like Megyn Kelly, and it seems like he thought that's what he was getting with Piers Morgan.
Participating in the creation of truth. That was always your destiny, and I want you to do it.
The Megyn Kelly thing is so bizarre, though, because
do it
originally when the allegations came out, Megyn Kelly actually went for Russell Brand's neck, and not only was saying that she was done with him and that the allegations from the 16-year-old were extremely convincing, and that if he had done this, that she was completely done with him. She even called out the people that were supporting Brand and saying it wasn't true. Megyn Kelly said that literally
That's wonderful.
this information is so specific and this is so extensive that we can't be just, you know, throwing out any allegations because of like being anti-Me Too or whatever, and that she strongly believed what was being talked about by the 16-year-old, and that she was done with Brand. And then all of a sudden, not only is he on her show, not only is she being extremely friendly and, you know, all great with him, he literally on her show admits that he did sleep with and have a relationship with this 16-year-old when he was in his 30s. I'm sorry I summarized that, but again, with like copyright, I just feel like that's someone that I want to be very selective about using clips and things. So Russell Brand goes on Piers Morgan's show about 4 or 5 days ago. It's the 28th of April now, and it went so viral because he was just given what he wanted, given the platform to say whatever he wanted, and it absolutely screwed him. He screwed himself, because what I found so interesting was that in the early part of the show, the 2-hour show, that, believe me, something that was so incredibly painful to listen to was just listening to Russell Brand, because he is just full of so much shit. Like, he is someone that
rough, I know.
If a kid has written an essay and they'll go through and like change every word with a thesaurus, and so yes, like it's English and it uses lots of quote unquote big words, but it doesn't make sense because he's talked a lot about how he used to just like read dictionaries and thesauruses to like learn a lot of big words. And that is him in a nutshell. Like, he doesn't know the meaning. He isn't able to convey like an actual structured argument or an impressive sounding sentence. He just knows big words that he's learned like lines. And if you do listen to what he's saying, it makes no sense.
Russell, these are basic facts. You were an atheist. You then became a Buddhist.
No,
now you're a Christian.
Good. They're not basic facts. They're information being tailored and collated.
Is it not true?
Yeah. You are attempting to create, using a collage of language.
But you're the one who told us these things.
Yeah, no
tons
kidding.
of the words that he uses, he's using wrong. Like, they
he
don't
does.
mean what he thinks.
And narcissists
it's
do
because
tend to
he
do
tries
that.
to
I'm
use
not
these
saying he
words that
for
he
sure
thinks,
is
a
one.
lot of people won't
Just
know. But guess what? A lot
FYI.
of people do know them, and it makes no sense what he's saying.
Yes,
and he
that's
also
right.
is someone that he never answers the question. At no
Never
point
answers
in the
the question.
2 hours
Never.
of questions that he has on Pierce's show does he answer them.
Some people would say, Russell, it's hypocrisy. The more principled stance would be, I'm not going to do Fox.
What am I trying to say? MO, be able to desecrate and denigrate kind of anything. I want to ask you, what do you think is pure?
Wait, for what?
You can say so many things about Piers Morgan, but he is a good interviewer.
Yeah, he
and
is.
In the beginning of the show, he actually says, Russell like goes after him and saying like, oh, you're just trying to get like basically a clip from me and you're going to edit this and like manipulate it. And Piers says, no, I'm going to post it as is. And it is. There's hardly any. I don't think there really is any cuts. There's like, you know, they zoom in and do like back and forth between them and show split screen and stuff. But there's not like cuts and true to his word, like there aren't. He hasn't clipped that and put it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Because why would he?
Why would he?
It's a massively viral thing, and so people, if Piers Morgan put the clip up, people would just go and watch that.
Right.
But people have gone and watched the entire thing, or like skip through it so you get your 30 seconds so it counts as a view. And it has been so
that's
talked
really
about.
rough, but
and so that is a skill in itself. I mean, there's so few, I say this all the time, there's so few good interviewers. And being able to not say something, I mean, that's even harder for Piers Morgan, is a skill, because a lot of people would have filled the silence or said, oh, okay, like let's move on, or asked another question. And Piers Morgan asked Russell Brand, oh, what's your favorite Bible passage? You brought this Bible to court, tell me what it is. And so Russell Brand, of course, like goes after him a bit and then starts to like flick through it, and he ends up flicking through it for what seems like 2 minutes.
Guy, come on. Ridiculous. Yeah. It's a lot. That's a lot. He really is flicking through that for a while. Holy crap.
And Piers Morgan says nothing, and he, I'm sure in his head, was like, stay stone face, stay stone face. He doesn't have any reaction, and at one point he looks down the camera like it's Jim from The Office or something, and it is just, you just hear the pages turning.
That's just embarrassing. Yikes.
My own speculation is that that like turning of the pages, that they have probably gone in post and like bumped the volume up so loud to get that, because you can tell from the pages turning that it's a Bible.
Sound.
Like you know that, I think it's rice paper it's called.
That kind of big
and
burger sound.
It's just the silence with the pages turning.
That's
so,
true.
because you know they wear like the lava mics, or they have the boom mics and stuff. So I'm sure they were like, bump that up to make it sound even more like deafening, the page turning. And he just looks like such a fucking idiot.
He does.
Like throughout
That's
the whole
wild.
thing. And as I said, at no point does he answer a question.
At no point does he answer a question. That's
tangents
right.
About nothing. It is a really good interview from the interviewer standpoint to show the subject for what they are. But it is, from Russell Brand's standpoint, it is one of the worst interviews that I have ever seen. It's just the way he comes across is so terrible.
But Piers Morgan Uncensored could be an opportunity to house, frame and present in a kind of graceful way, but I happen to be in a sort of a really weird situation in a way that's deeply similar and comparable to your own. I can't keep drinking the government water, Piers.
And now, instead of using this book promotion as like a thinly veiled, let me go on all these friendly shows, and he thinks he's like so charismatic and stuff.
He does seem to think that. I'll give her that one.
Absolutely blast out about these allegations, because I'm sure there were tons of people in the comments. Let me know if there was people that weren't aware about these allegations, but now are aware because of how viral this clip and this interview have gone. I think there's going to be a lot more that comes out about Brand. Stuff will come out regardless of what happens in the case, but if he is found guilty, which in my opinion there's a lot of evidence, I think that you're just going to see so much come out. There'll probably be like another documentary and things like that, and it is something I'm very, very interested in covering. If this video does okay, I would love to do like around the court case and stuff, because I really do like talking about the legal celebrity stuff. And
she's awesome at it too.
Really, there's two scenarios here. There's scenario one, which is Russell Brand is a predator, a monster, and rapist based on the following.
Right.
For 30 years, he's told us how disgusting he is. There are scores and scores of people all saying the exact same story. There are alleged victims all saying the exact same story for over 3 decades, despite not knowing one another. There are WhatsApp groups going back decades and messages, groups and things like that, where female comedians have warned one another about Brand.
I mean, thank God for that.
There are countless examples of Brand via networks and producers removing comments and jokes about him and the allegations. Over the years, Brand has used his lawyers and his millions to go after and intimidate victims, people speaking out, or just comedians even making jokes. There is avalanches of text messages, medical reports, complaints, and other forms of documentation supporting all of the aforementioned. That is scenario 1. Scenario 2 is that these hundreds, potentially thousands of people are all wrong, and everyone has made all of this up, and Russell Brand is innocent. I will leave to you to decide what scenario you think is more likely. And I think that given how obvious the answer seems, that the case in October will be very interesting, and hopefully we can cover it. But if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I know that this was
fooling with
a
audio
really tough, long video
it really
with just a lot of really difficult subject matter. So I.
All right, let's do a little palate cleanser with Philip DeFranco. Okay, before we do any Candy Owens. Oh, okay, there we go. Perfect. Here we go.
We need to talk about why a key piece of Jeffrey Epstein evidence has been hidden from the public, with even the DOJ not having seen it. Why Pete Hegseth would not confirm or deny today that America has trained kamikaze dolphins armed with explosives. Why this Trump Puerto Rico scandal most people haven't even heard about is even crazier than you'd think. First, we've got to talk about this.
I can't confirm or deny whether we have kamikaze dolphins. But I can confirm they don't.
So that is Secretary of Defense, or some call him the Secretary of War Crimes, Pete Hegseth, rejecting recent rumors that Iran is using trained dolphins armed with explosives to block the Strait of Hormuz, which actually isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. With the idea stemming from the Wall Street Journal reporting that Iranian officials said that they might use previously unused weapons to attack American warships, including mine-carrying dolphins. And actually, looking back, you had the BBC reporting in the year 2000 that Iran had purchased dolphins trained to kill for the Soviet Navy. But whatever the case may be, whatever methods are actually being used, what is clear is that the US and Iran are now effectively in a battle for control of the strait. And the threat of Donald Trump deciding to fully unleash the US military on Iran again, it's casting a shadow over the whole situation.
If you attack American troops or innocent commercial shipping, you will face overwhelming and devastating American firepower. The president has been very clear about this.
But with all this, we got to go back to yesterday, the start of what the White House is calling Project Freedom, which Trump actually announced on Sunday and said would involve the U.S. guiding ships through the Strait of Hormuz to free up people, companies, and countries that have done absolutely nothing wrong. With Trump describing the effort as a humanitarian gesture on behalf of the United States. And to be fair, there is a real humanitarian issue there, because among other things, you had the UN warning today that an unprecedented crisis is unfolding for 20,000 seafarers who are stranded in the Persian Gulf, who face worsening conditions on board, including shortages of food and fresh water. That said, at least so far, there's really no sign yet that Project Freedom's helping. And instead, we've just been seeing a flare-up of violence, sparking fears that the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran might soon collapse. Right, to start with what we've been seeing, you had 2 American naval destroyers passing through the strait, closely followed by 2 commercial ships. You had the head of Central Command claiming that its forces weren't escorting those vessels, but simply clearing the way for traffic. But either way, in the process, the U.S. reportedly shot down Iranian cruise missiles and drones and destroyed 6 Iranian speedboats that had threatened vessels. And while the destroyers and the ships that were with them didn't suffer any damage, at least a couple of other vessels reported taking hits. Also on land, you had Oman reporting an attack that injured 2 people in a company housing complex, and you had a fire breaking out at a major oil facility in the UAE. And there, you had the government saying that overall the country's air defenses had engaged 12 ballistic missiles, 3 cruise missiles, and 4 UAVs launched from Iran, resulting in 3 moderate injuries. Injuries that were reportedly suffered by 3 foreign workers in the country, which is something that also stands out because foreign workers make up a majority of the population in many Arab Gulf states, often facing exploitation, abuse, and other issues. And so now also with that, they make up a significant portion of the people who have been killed in these countries. One advocacy group, for example, said that the attacks since the start of the war have killed at least 24 foreign workers in the Gulf, along with 4 in Israel, all while the cost of going back home has only gone up. But also with this, you had Iran defending their tactics. Well,
I mean, Iran's been forced into a corner here. I mean, it can't be easy.
Foreign Ministry spokesperson claiming we feel no animosity toward any country of the region, but adding, it's an open secret that the United States uses its military bases, its military assets, and also use the logistical support provided by some of these countries to further their active aggression against Iran. And then finally say, the U.S. military presence in the region is a liability and brings nothing but insecurity. You also had Iran's top negotiator accusing the U.S. of violating the ceasefire and saying, we know full well that the continuation of the status quo is intolerable for America, while we have not even begun yet. Though on the other end, you've had American officials saying the opposite. Or with Hegseth, for example, speaking at that press conference alongside Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, this morning. And in addition to addressing the issue of weaponized marine life, he described Project Freedom as a temporary, defensive, and separate mission.
This operation is separate and distinct from Operation Epic Fury. Project Freedom is defensive in nature, focused in scope, and temporary in duration, with one mission: protecting innocent commercial shipping from Iranian aggression. American forces won't need to enter Iranian waters or airspace. It's not necessary.
Tell us more about
We're not looking for a fight, but Iran also cannot be allowed to block innocent countries and their goods from an international waterway.
And then, kind of as per usual, you had Hegseth arguing that the operation has already been a huge success.
As a direct gift from the United States to the world, we have established a powerful red, white, and blue dome over the strait. 2 U.S. commercial ships, along with American destroyers, have already safely transited the strait, showing the lane is clear. We know the Iranians are embarrassed by this fact. They said they control the strait. They do not.
Well, the fact that, the American military and a couple of other ships made their way through the strait may show that Iran doesn't have 100% control over the waterway. Yesterday's events, it also appears to clearly show why no more ships have gone through since. It looks risky. Though notably, despite the fighting yesterday and despite Trump threatening on Fox yesterday to blow Iran off the face of the earth if it attacked American vessels participating in Project Freedom, the position of the administration is that the ceasefire remains in effect.
No, the ceasefire is not over. Ultimately, this is a separate and distinct project.
And with that, you had Kane claiming that Iranian attacks, including more than 10 against U.S. forces, were all, quote, below the threshold of restarting major combat operations at this point. And when later asked what level of attacks would meet the threshold, he responded,
the threshold of restarting is a political decision above my pay grade. What I'll say is it's low harassing fire right now. It feels like Iran is grasping at straws to try to do something across the southern flank.
But what we're seeing is that the attacks have continued into today, or with the UAE's defense ministry announcing this morning that it was still intercepting ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. When asked by a reporter today what would constitute a violation, you just had Trump saying, well, you'll find out because I'll let you know. All while the U.S. and Israel are reportedly working together to prepare for a potential new round of strikes on Iran, which would focus on energy infrastructure and the targeted killing of senior Iranian officials. Right, and with that, you had an unnamed source telling CNN the intention would be to carry out a short campaign aimed at pressuring Iran into further concessions and negotiations. And then connected to that, you had Trump telling conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt yesterday that if he decides to return to war against Iran, it would be over in 2 or 3 weeks. The one, everything with Trump is apparently going to be figured out in 2 to 3 weeks. And 2, Trump's timeline for ending this war specifically, it's constantly just been shifting. So we really can't say him saying that means much. Also, a say worth noting here is that you had him walking back on previously stated, though also frequently shifting, objectives for the war. So for example, while he continued to emphasize that any deal must ensure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, he downplayed the importance of the country's ballistic missile program.
Look, missiles are bad. But yeah, and they do have to cap it. But this is about they cannot have a nuclear weapon.
But administration officials have previously argued that it was necessary to destroy Iran's ballistic missile program because it was being used to create a conventional shield to protect its nuclear ambitions. Also, very notably, U.S. intelligence assessments reportedly indicate that the time Iran would need to build a nuclear weapon hasn't changed since last summer, since nuclear targets haven't been prioritized. Analysts still estimating that Iran would need around a year to build a weapon if leaders decided to pursue that path. Right, and also before you had Trump and others saying that the war aimed to destroy Iran's ability to support proxy groups in the region. But then in this interview, he refused to say that Iran would be stopped from funding proxies, only that they wouldn't be in a position economically to do so. Then also, on that note, you had Trump downplaying the impact of the war on the U.S. economy, saying that he actually thought it would be much worse, but started the war anyways.
When I first did this, I thought maybe the market would go down 20 or 25%, and I was okay with that because I know it would come back up. But I thought it would go down, and I thought oil could hit 200, 250. Well, oil's at $100. $102.
Now, Trump there, he might be referring to the U.S. benchmark oil price, but the global benchmark, Brent crude, that actually hit $114 a barrel yesterday and then dropped to around $112 this morning. But also, as far as the impact on us, Americans, they're now paying around 50% more at the pump than they were before this war. You've got AAA reporting that the national gas average is now $4.48 per gallon. All while S&P Global Energy, they've warned in a new report that even after the Hormuz reopens, it will take an additional 7 months at minimum to fully restore upstream production. And that at minimum part is key because the 7-month timeline assumes 1, there's no permanent damage to energy infrastructure, and 2, supply chains operate smoothly. And then also, actually, we've got to talk about how as Americans, they're fed up with these gas prices, they're also fed up waiting for answers on Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes. So there, we actually have a big development because there is a federal prosecutor who just backed a petition to get Jeffrey Epstein's alleged suicide note released to the public. Right, and this actually starts with a report from the New York Times last week noting that a potential suicide note had been hidden from public view for years. And that note stems from an alleged attempt in July of 2019, a few weeks before Epstein was actually found dead. Right, at the time, he was found unresponsive with red marks around his neck, but he survived and his cellmate said that he discovered the note. Though, Epstein apparently told jail officials that he was not suicidal and his cellmate had attacked him. But Epstein also apparently never repeated that claim and his cellmate denied attacking him, so that's a whole other full thing. But that note that was found, it was sealed as part of the criminal case for the cellmate, who was convicted of quadruple homicide but also maintains that he's innocent. So investigators who were looking into Epstein's death may have actually never gotten their hands on this note, even though it could be a substantial piece of evidence. Right, in this note, it also wasn't found in the Epstein files, and a DOJ spokesperson even told the Times that the agency has not seen it. Also, as far as if the note's legitimate, you have the cellmate's lawyers saying that they authenticated it, but we also don't know how. So you had the Times petitioning a judge in New York to unseal the note. And yesterday, you had a federal prosecutor supporting this, agreeing that there is no reason for the courts to keep it sealed because the cellmate who discovered the note has already disclosed some of its contents. But he previously did an interview where he described finding it and claimed that Epstein had written that the FBI had looked into him for months and found nothing before then adding, "What do you want me to do? Cry about it?" It also apparently included a smiley face and a line about saying goodbye. And reportedly, you had U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton writing a letter saying that anything the cellmate disclosed in public statements does not need to be continually sealed anymore. So now it's up to a judge to decide if we, the public, will ever actually see it. But then also, you have a member of the House Oversight Committee aiding this push as well. Because yesterday, Representative Raja Krishnamurthy wrote a letter to the DOJ asking it to work with this judge to release the note, saying it must be immediately reviewed and publicly released to aid federal officials who are investigating Jeffrey Epstein and the circumstances around his death. And adding, the DOJ has yet to make any arrests other than Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, despite the existence of millions of documents that suggest a vast network of sex traffickers, including many high-profile individuals at the center. It is critical that the department avoid the appearance of covering up for criminals simply because of a person's status and resources. If a suicide note exists and was not reviewed, obtained, or disclosed, the department must explain why. And then also asking the department to answer a handful of questions like if it ever obtained, sought access to, or verified the note, did it ever consider it relevant to any investigation into Epstein, and if there are other known materials related to Epstein that have not been included in the DOJ reviews. And notably, this is coming as there's other ongoing efforts to hold Epstein and his associates accountable. With, for example, survivors recently pushing the state of New York to pass legislation that would update laws to criminalize behavior that benefits from and aids in trafficking. With a lawyer who works for the group Enough Abuse saying, trafficking is not sustained by one single actor. It is not just Jeffrey Epstein. It is a network that includes financial backers, businesses, and other intermediaries who often escape accountability. And saying this bill will disrupt that. And it would also make it easier for Epstein's victims to sue his estate by getting rid of a policy that prevents people from recovering damages from a dead person's estate. So with that, yesterday you had a group of survivors speaking out in support of the law, with one saying, abuse is often enabled by a broader network of people and companies who shield the abuser and silence the victim, and saying it is unacceptable that survivors are silenced by technicalities while enablers hide behind legal loopholes. And with that, you had the state senator who introduced the bill thanking the survivors and adding, they showed incredible courage in coming forward and saying, now it's our turn to act. The federal government may have turned its back on sex trafficking victims, but New York never will. But then also on the federal level, you have Democrats in the Oversight Committee announcing that they will be holding a hearing with Epstein survivors in Palm Beach on May 12th, with members also working on an upcoming deposition with Pam Bondi and demanding that it be videotaped and released to the public. And so there are more of these avenues for information and transparency that are coming up, but it still remains to be seen if the accountability that the public is really after, if that's actually on the way. Right? Will there be arrests? Will there be charges? Or is this just kind of a waiting game that never ends? And then there's more we got to dive into in just a minute, but first let me thank a sponsor and say, you ever leave the house for one quick errand and then somehow your day turns into a side quest with 6 stops and weather? They got more than you know. But then, diving right back into the news, we've got to talk about this alleged conspiracy that goes so deep that at one end, it involves a Puerto Rican prison gang, and at the other end, you have the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. And if this ProPublica report's correct, they're still trying to bury the whole thing under the rug. And as far as how this whole thing worked, according to investigators, first, you had a drone that would fly over a prison in Puerto Rico and drop off a package of narcotics. Then, staff at the prison would help get the drugs inside and distribute them while acting as lookouts. And then finally, leaders of a prison gang known as Los Tiburones, or the Sharks, they would sell the drugs to other inmates. inmates. But then also here's the twist. They didn't sell them for money, at least not always. Instead, they sold them for votes. Specifically, votes for the island's now Republican governor, Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, who I'm going to refer to by her nickname, Jago. And she's got this long history in Republican politics. She served as the party chair for the territory, represented Puerto Rico in Congress, and actually did a lot of work with Latinos for Trump. And so in January of 2025, when she took office as governor, you had Trump congratulating her, and Jago, she pushed for a statue of him to be built at the Capitol building in San Juan. All while, for a president who claimed to be concerned about drug trafficking, election integrity, Trump didn't seem too worried about the allegations that were coming out of Puerto Rico. But even though the investigation implicated not just inmates and prison staff, but possibly Jago herself. You had multiple sources telling ProPublica that officials were working toward determining whether she or her campaign were involved in the scheme, and they found some stuff. Stuff like evidence that Jago had spoken to a gang member, including a Facebook post in which one gang leader bragged about his connection to her, or with him reportedly attaching a photo of himself talking to her on WhatsApp at the time that she was running in her party's primary for governor. So while they kept probing into that, you had federal prosecutors beginning to prepare an indictment against the people that they had already caught. But then, all of a sudden, everything changes in November of 2024, right after Trump and Jago won their respective elections. According to ProPublica, higher-ups in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Puerto Rico told the prosecutors to exclude the voting-related charges against the inmates and all charges against the prison staff. So even though the drugs for vote scheme was described in the indictment that December, nobody was charged for it. And then, soon after Trump entered the White House, a supervisor to the lead prosecutor reportedly told him to stop the investigation altogether, which, kind of looks like Trump's DOJ is covering up an illegal scheme to buy votes for a Trump-loving Republican governor. Now with that, if you ask the DOJ itself, they point out that the order to exclude election-related charges, that was given before Trump took office, which is true. But it's also true that the U.S. Attorney for the District of Puerto Rico was appointed by Trump and reportedly enjoyed a friendly working relationship with Pam Bondi when they were both in Florida. Plus, if you ask people who were involved in the case, they say that the timing with Trump's election victory was clearly not a coincidence. Or with one saying, before the election, it was definitely full steam ahead. After the election, that all changed. And you had another adding, we invested so much effort to make a difference, we're frustrated, but there's nothing we can do. And then a third explaining, it was like you're watching a puppet show, but you can't see the strings. You know what you're seeing isn't telling the whole story. There was some kind of invisible hand. Okay. And then something that made it even weirder is that a magistrate judge in a different case last October mentioned what they called an unrelated white-collar investigation involving the governor of Puerto Rico. But the U.S. Attorney's Office denied that any such investigation even exists. So really, whatever's going on, it doesn't seem like we're gonna get much clarity from this DOJ. One of the crazy things is, it wasn't just inmates exchanging drugs for votes. Right? The allegations were even more fucked up than that. Reportedly, if the inmates didn't go along with it, there were punishments that included withholding food or forcing them to sit with their arms folded while they were beaten and kicked. And, at least according to the indictment, many of these inmates were addicted, so the only way they could keep from going into withdrawal was to vote for Jago. It's all just so insane, and yet rather than seemingly trying to prosecute and investigate these actual crimes, you have Tulsi Gabbard seizing Puerto Rico's voting machines. And actually, with that, we then got to talk about what Trump's minions are doing with our elections back on the mainland as well. Because Trump's DOJ just demanded the names, home addresses, emails, and phone numbers of every single person who worked the 2020 election in Fulton County, Georgia. And I'm not talking about just like county employees. We're talking poll workers, volunteers, even the bus drivers who operated mobile voting locations. And the DOJ, one, they won't say why, and two, it's all happening as there's record-breaking early voting that's underway in Georgia right now. But as far as this demand, it came through a grand jury subpoena. And all this stuff that they're demanding, it's getting handed over to a federal investigation that's tied to Trump's repeatedly debunked claims that Fulton County stole the 2020 election from. And again, one of the wild parts is we don't know what the DOJ plans to do with this information, and they haven't responded to media questions about it, at least as of recording. So we're just supposed to trust that the federal government collecting the home addresses of thousands of citizens who worked on an election 5 years ago, it's fine and normal. But Fulton County, they're not letting this go quietly, right? You have lawyers for the county filing a motion yesterday asking the judge to block the subpoena entirely. And in the motion, the lawyers argued that the subpoena is meant to, quote, target, harass, and punish the president's perceived political opponents. And then noting that Trump has obsessively propagated the debunked conspiracy theory that Fulton County stole the 2020 election from. And he's made it clear that he seeks retribution against those who refuse to indulge his baseless claims. Right, and the motion also makes a really important point about the legal logic, because the lawyers argue that the subpoena, quote, cannot yield any evidence that could result in a criminal prosecution for a few reasons. And the biggest one, the statute of limitations has already expired on any alleged crimes related to the 2020 election. And so in addition to this already being bogus and debunked, the DOJ is now collecting personal information for thousands of people in connection with crimes that they can't even prosecute anyway. Which then raises the question of, well, if you can't prosecute, what does this information actually do? What is it for? And even though I'm going to mention what the experts are pointing to, you don't have to be an expert to understand the obvious answer. The goal might just be to undermine the democratic process while the midterms are happening. Again, think of the timing. Early voting is underway in Georgia right now, and the turnout, it's breaking records. According to government accounts, more than 214,000 people cast ballots during the first 7 days of early voting. That is a 28% jump from who early voted in the last midterm elections. And so with that in their motion, Fulton County accused the Trump administration of bringing the subpoena at a time when election workers fear for their personal safety. And with that, you have the leader of the Georgia voting rights group Fair Fight Action saying roughly a third of election officials are threatened on the job, and more than half worry it's making it harder to hire and keep election workers, saying they're trying to break our democracy by attacking the infrastructure, but we are fighting back hard. But with this, there's a very real concern, right? Because if you are a poll worker reading the news and you see that the federal DOJ is now collecting the home addresses of everyone who worked the last election, are you going to want to sign up for the next one? Or if you're just an everyday person who's watched election workers facing threats and harassment for years, are you going to volunteer when the federal government just made it clear that they're tracking who you are? That's part of the play here. The investigation itself is part of the threat. It's part of the punishment. That's why it's more important than ever that the every average day person be a little braver today. That's why I think that the people still putting themselves into this position, they're everyday heroes. And I mean that for everywhere, not just Georgia. Because the Trump administration, they've made Georgia the epicenter of this effort, but it is not limited to Georgia. While they set the tone with that unprecedented FBI raid on an election warehouse back in January, the DOJ has been making similar moves all over the place. They issued a subpoena for the 2020 audit records in Maricopa County, Arizona. They demanded that Wayne County, Michigan turn over its 2024 ballots. But nothing really tangible has come from any of these probes. We're not seeing prosecutions or evidence presented. No fraud actually established. Just non-stop claims of evidence that is always supposedly coming, but then not. Feels like it's one of the biggest Trump things. We're always like 2 weeks away from the healthcare plan and infrastructure week and the war being done, even though we've already won it 18 times apparently. And actually, a few weeks ago, you had a Fox News anchor pressing FBI Director Kash Patel on Trump's election fraud claims, and here was his answer.
We've got all the evidence. I can announce on your show that we've got all the information we need. We're working with our prosecutors, the Department of Justice, and their Attorney General Todd Blanche, and we are going to be making arrests, and it's coming, and I promise you, it's coming soon.
And so now, let's hold that side by side with what's happening today. The FBI director is publicly claiming the DOJ already has all the information it needs to make arrests. But that same DOJ is subpoenaing the personal information of thousands of people in Fulton County. So what is it? Either Patel was wrong on Fox News and the DOJ doesn't actually have the information it needs, in which case this is a fishing expedition, or he was right and they do have what they need, in which case the subpoena isn't about gathering evidence. You don't get to claim both at the same time, or at least not believably. But then with this, you know, the question becomes, which way is it going to play out, right? One of the two most likely ways. Option 1's the 2020 playbook. The DOJ keeps claiming there's evidence. The evidence never materializes. The investigations, they linger long enough to chill participation, and then they fade out without anyone being prosecuted. And then option 2, that's the Comey playbook. The DOJ comes up with evidence and indicts someone, but the actual evidence turns out to be the equivalent of seashells on a beach. Or the prosecution that's kind of just doomed, but it's really not about winning. It's about putting someone through the meat grinder of a federal case. And so in the meantime, while we see how all this plays out, let me just end on a personal note. To the thousands of just regular people that this is meant to threaten and intimidate, this sucks. But please know that so many Americans have your back, know that this is fucking ridiculous. And to the broader population of America, when you see this happen, please don't let the impact be you running away, you thinking that it is not worth volunteering for the next one. Because it is. They are scared of you. They don't try to suppress votes or take away voting power or scare people away from being a part of all this unless it actually matters. And then there's more we've got to dive into in just a minute, but first let me thank a sponsor and say, you know, we've been giving away $500 just about every week since early 2024, thanks to our sponsor, SeatGeek. That's nearly $60,000 in free live entertainment, and if you still haven't entered yet, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, really. Actually, no, I do. Spring's around the corner and the events are ramping up. They probably have it. And I just gotta say, it's been awesome. Franco and make some memories. But then, diving right back into the news, we've got to talk about how a cruise ship is stranded at sea. At least 3 passengers are dead, 3 more are sick, with 1 in critical care. Nearly 150 people are still on board, waiting to find out if they've been exposed to a rare and deadly virus. Meanwhile, Cape Verde refused to let them dock. Spain has finally agreed to take them in, and the World Health Organization just confirmed what's been killing them. But here's the timeline. The Hondias set sail on April 1st, traveling from Argentina to Antarctica over the span of a few weeks. And by April 6th, just 5 days into this voyage, 1 passenger started developing a fever, a headache, a mild diarrhea. But then 5 days after the symptoms began, he died. And then his wife, she started showing symptoms shortly after, and she left the ship with her husband's body on April 24th, but 2 days later, she died too. Right, and then just a few days later, you had a 3rd passenger dying showing similar symptoms. But then, the World Health Organization confirming that the first 2 passengers died from a hantavirus infection on May 4th. And for those who haven't heard of hantavirus, it's a family of viruses mostly spread through contact with rodent droppings. Right, so you could be exposed by cleaning up after rats in a garage or drinking from a can that a rodent had contaminated. It's actually relatively uncommon. The US has seen fewer than 900 cases total since 2020. But for the people who do get it, it is a severe illness.
People can develop lung failure, heart failure, kidney failure. A very severe viral pneumonia is very often how this manifests.
And while different strains, affect the body differently and survival rates vary, for many forms of this illness, outcomes are very difficult to predict. And so that's the situation that passengers on the Hondias have been living with for nearly a month. Now, as far as the investigation, you have investigators really not knowing how the outbreak began yet, though there are a couple of leading theories. One's that rats may have stowed away on board and contaminated food or surfaces. Though another is that a passenger may have been exposed before boarding, because reports indicate that hantavirus symptoms can take sometimes up to 2 months to appear after exposure, which means that they could have carried it on board without knowing. And while hantavirus is rarely contagious between people, it's not impossible, which is part of what's made this whole situation so difficult to manage. And as far as the people that are on board this ship, like the past month has been just a nightmare.
What's happening right now is very real for all of us here. We're not just a story. We're not just headlines. We're people. People with families, with lives, with people waiting for us at home. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's the hardest part. All we want right now is to feel safe, to have clarity, and to get home.
Right, as far as the ship, it reached Cape Verde waters on May 3rd. Doctors there have been monitoring the 3 passengers who were showing symptoms, collecting samples, trying to support the situation medically, but the ship also hasn't been allowed to dock. Right, Cape Verde authorities, they decided not to allow the Hondias to come ashore. And there you had a WHO official explaining it's been very tricky for Cape Verdean authorities, saying what they have to deal with is a public health event, and of course, they have been thinking about the protection of the population here. And so essentially, without knowing the full scope of this outbreak, they're keeping their distance. And if that sounds like, or it gives you memories of like COVID-era responses, that's because it is. Right after what happened with COVID, with cruise ship outbreaks, the World Health Organization actually updated international regulations to address exactly this type of situation.
What the regulations say, and it's a legally binding treaty, is that a port must allow passengers who are sick to disembark, and it can only fail to do that if it literally does not have the capacity to care for them. It can't just say, we're afraid for our own people.
And so actually with that, Cape Verde's position has been criticized as being inconsistent with its WHO obligations.
What's happening now is unethical, it's unlawful, and it's dangerous.
Though the counter-argument that's been raised is that this isn't Cape Verde's ship, so why should they bear the burden? Though there, you have people pushing back saying, well, the answer is being a member of the World Health Organization comes with binding commitments. And so further down the line, one of the things to look to the situation for is to find out whether Cape Verde is going to face legal consequences. But as far as what's happening now, Spain stepped in. And as far as what's been announced first, at least 2 of the sick passengers are going to be transferred to the Netherlands for medical care. Also, the 3rd passenger symptoms are reportedly less severe at the moment, but that also could change, and they might eventually be added to the transfer list. After that, the ship is going to set sail for the Spanish Canary Islands, where WHO officials are prepared to conduct a full investigation, disinfect the ship, and assess the risk of the remaining passengers. And again, while person-to-person transmission of the hantavirus is rare, containment remains a priority for really anyone considered higher risk. And so in the meantime, passengers have been asked to stay in their cabins. And the hope is that no additional cases develop before the ship's able to dock and there's a proper assessment. Right, but then, jumping from that to our final story of the day today, we need to talk about State Farm. Because State Farm customers in California, they're just kind of hanging in limbo as state regulators are gunning for the company's license, as well as millions of dollars over how they handled the claims from the LA fires last year. Because LA, it got hit with some pretty serious wildfires last year. We're talking like 16,000 structures destroyed, more than 30 people killed. And after the dust settled, a bunch of people who were insured through State Farm, they had a whole variety of issues, and not for the first time. In one case, State Farm waited nearly 3 months before starting to investigate a claim. In another, the company delayed paying a customer for months while internally acknowledging that the payment should have been approved. Then there's also the illegally denied payments for testing for toxins and smoke damage claims. Or with an investigation by state regulators looking into over 200 claims like that, and they reportedly found that State Farm violated the law hundreds of times. With the California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara saying, our investigation found that State Farm delayed, underpaid, and buried policyholders in red tape at the worst moment of their lives, saying that is unacceptable and we are taking decisive action to hold them accountable. And that includes what's called a major enforcement action, including seeking upwards of $2 million in penalties and even potential suspending of their license, which ends up being a pretty massive deal when you're talking about the state's largest carrier. Though to be clear, nothing's set in stone right now. In fact, in a lot of cases, State Farm denied any wrongdoing, though in some included in the investigation, they did agree with the state's findings and awarded more money to policyholders. And with that, they said that they've paid more than $5.7 billion on more than 13,000 auto and home insurance claims related to the fires. So you have them pushing back hard against the accusations of mismanagement, saying California's homeowners insurance market is the most dysfunctional in the country, and State Farm has worked to be part of real solutions. And saying we reject any suggestion State Farm engaged in a general practice of mishandling or intentionally underpaying wildfire claims, and we will respond through the process. And then adding a threat to halt their license is a, quote, quote, reckless, politically motivated
Insurance
attack
companies
that could ultimately
basically just-
cripple California's
that's their
homeowners
business
insurance
now.
market. And, you know, with this, even the insurance department
It's
officials are
almost
saying
as
this
if
is a
we
rare
shouldn't have
situation. Saying for a
fucking
wildfire, we haven't found a comparable
trusts.
action in the last 25 years. Saying
We
it's
should be
unprecedented, but
trust-busting.
these fires were unprecedented in many ways. And adding our goal is twofold. Hold State Farm accountable through penalties
Oh my
and speed up recovery in Los Angeles. And you have many saying that accountability, it's been a long time coming, with consumer advocates really, they've been pushing this issue for a while. And with that, you had a
If we
spokesperson
run
for the
this
Insurance
again
Fairness
one more
Project saying there needs to be accountability when insurance companies fail policyholders, especially in the aftermath of devastating and life-altering climate disasters. Saying Californians pay their premiums with the expectation that coverage will be there when disaster strikes, not delayed, denied, or mishandled. And adding strong oversight like this is essential to restoring trust and ensuring the system works for consumers and not just insurers. But that there, my friends, you beautiful bastards, is the end of your Tuesday Philip DeFranco show. And as I say goodbye to you and let you back into the horrors of the world, let me just remind you, if you'd like a fun break, get entertained, be around like-minded people, just a good time, you can go to crashingouttour.com, link in the description, and get some tickets and see me and my buddy Alex Perlman live. With that said, thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.
All right, guys. I'll be back in the morning with some scam baiting and just continuing to